Robert Redford, welcome back to our program.
My pleasure.
We have talked a lot over the years about your amazing, brilliant film career. You've had quite a few outlawish films. I mean, the best, most famous one, of course, is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And then there was The Sting, and you paired up with Paul Newman. But what I was fascinated about reading, a lot of the stuff about you, is that you were kind of like that as a kid. You were a bit of an outlaw yourself. You were a rebel.
Yes, that's true. As I got older and I went into acting, I was drawn to the idea of outlaw characters. What's really interesting, though, that I don't know how many people have picked up in terms of Paul Newman and I, is that when we did Butch Cassidy, initially he was offered the Sundance Kid. And I was going to be Butch Cassidy. And then I met with the director, and when I met with George Roy Hill, I said, well, yeah, I can do that, but I'm much more drawn to the Sundance Kid. And he got convinced of that. So I played Sundance. So they switched the title. It was originally going to be the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy.
That gave you a whole new exposure, right? I mean, that was what launched you into the career that you're now, apparently retiring from. Are you really retiring?
No, I don't use
Is this really your
no,
last film?
No, I think that's a mistake. I should never have said anything like that. I think just moving into a different territory. I've acted long enough, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it because I thought that distracted from the value of the film and the cast. It was a wonderful cast that I was working with.
So can I just get it straight? Is this the last film you plan to do as an actor?
Maybe. Rather than talking about retiring, you just kind of slip easily into another territory.
And the particular territory that you want to slip into now is which?
Directing and producing, yeah.
There's such a lot of existential questions right now about what does the world have for me? What am I going to do? I mean, part of it is your non-acting life, and that's about the climate and the environment.
Yes.
And you are really dedicated to that.
Very much
You've
so,
been to
yeah.
the United Nations. You've tried very hard to move the world along on this, particularly your own country, where the current government sort of denies the seriousness of climate change. Tell me about what you do in your personal and public life to move this along.
Well, I think you have to look at where it all started. And for me, it started when I was a kid growing up in Los Angeles. And at the end of the Second World War, it was a wonderful city to me. And then once the war ended and money came back into the picture, things changed. And suddenly there was development out of control, and it had green spaces that were suddenly wiped out by buildings and so forth. And where Santa Monica Boulevard had a trolley car going down the center of it, and it was gone, and suddenly it's a freeway. And I thought, well, wait a minute, what's going on? In order to progress, they're wiping out something really valuable.
It just so happens that one of the greatest films you made, All the President's Men, is all about investigating, holding accountable, and looking for the truth. What do you think about All the President's Men and having done that film?
I think we're in a similar spot now. I think that the power that's out there has taken us to the brink where you no longer know what the truth is. And so if you don't know what the truth is, how can you talk about what is truthful or not? So I think we're right at that brink. And I guess I see it metaphorically as, it used to be that two sides would come together. They would cross the aisle, so to speak. They would cross the aisle to work together to achieve something that would benefit the public. And now it's no longer an aisle to be crossed, it's a moat. There's a gigantic chasm between 2 points of view. And they're not crossing to work with each other. They're getting ideologically rigid and stuck. And we're the losers. And I think that's got to change.
The whole Me Too movement, which started in your industry in Hollywood, which is, I think, fascinating for the floodgates that it opened. Had you any inkling that this was sort of de rigueur in Hollywood, that big producers or directors or others were using this power over so many people, including presumably a lot of your co-stars?
Yes, I was very much aware of that. I think I probably took it somewhat for granted because it was so pervasive. It was just part of the deal.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just there and has been for a long time. I didn't pay much attention to it. I wasn't a part of it, obviously, but I just considered that's what it is, The only thing I was interested in was creating an alternative. That was my ambition. But yes, I was aware that existed, yeah. When you have the casting couch.
Might you have said something if you knew? Because some people say, well, if you knew about it, why didn't you say anything about it?
Because it didn't come close to home. It didn't come to me. It didn't come to my feet. You know, it just was out there. And I didn't pay a lot. I just accepted that's the way it was. I didn't like it, but I didn't see it was my job to do anything about it because it was just so pervasive. You know, I just focused on creating an alternative.
So
Now
do you
it's
think
different.
now
Now
the
it's-
moment is important? This,
Yes.
This historical moment?
I do. I think it's really important, particularly for women.
Yeah, of course. And what I'm interested in also is women who age and who age out of great roles, and obviously women who don't get paid equal to men for the roles that they play. I guess for a man, it's kind of easy. You're a heartthrob, you're so handsome, you've had all these roles, and you can go on having roles for as long as you want. But Sissy Spacek, who's a brilliant actress, and all those people and women of her generation have found it very difficult to keep getting roles.
That's sad. If you look at, for example, if you look at European films and you look at actresses like Jean Moreau, and you see films like Jules and Jim, and you see older actresses having key roles, and they do beautifully, and they're aged, they've aged. And I think that's one of the downsides of Hollywood is that at least for a while, it may be changing now, but at least for a while, it wouldn't accept aging. Everyone had to be eternally young. And think of the loss of actors that we lost that could have kept acting if we had followed the European example.
Well, I wonder if you learned that in Europe. I mean, obviously not when you were a young man, but you did at a very young age, you went to Europe.
Yeah.
And you wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
You weren't thinking about acting at that time.
No.
What was it like? Were you accepted as a young American in Europe at that time? Were you?
No.
What was it like?
No, it was just the opposite because I wasn't aware that the Suez Crisis had happened at that time.
It was 1957, just when you got there, right?
Yeah,
56,
and I wasn't
57.
aware of that. I was paying no attention to politics, so I wasn't aware that we were the villains in that. You know, so when I got to Paris, I thought, I'm getting to the place I've dreamed about, and suddenly, I was treated horribly, because somehow I was symbolic of what had gone wrong. I had no idea what was going on until slowly I realized it was kind of our fault. We had alienated a whole culture, and I wasn't even aware of it. I was blind to that because I wasn't interested or aware of politics in those days, but it made me aware.
Was that the education of Robert Redford?
It certainly was the beginning of, that was part of it, yeah, for sure. It was a shock, and it was a shock that I needed, and I'm so glad that I did go to Europe, and I witnessed other cultures and how they thought and how they saw the world.
Robert Redford, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.